The information contained in this video is strictly for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or other professional advice and is not a substitute for consultation with a qualified professional. The opinions expressed in the show do not necessarily reflect the views of the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and the City University of New York. State of Mind is a web-based discussion program that explores the relevant social, economic, and political issues that are prominent at the post-secondary level of education. State of Mind is sponsored by the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. BMCC. Start here, go anywhere. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Krishna Nadella, and this is State of Mind. Wrapping up our Older but Wiser series, today's topic is entitled The Quarter-Life Crisis. The quarter-life crisis is a period of life usually ranging from the 20s to the early 30s in which a person begins to feel doubtful about their own lives, brought on by the stress of becoming an adult. Common symptoms of a quarter-life crisis are often feelings of being lost, scared, lonely, or confused about what steps to take in order to transition properly into adulthood. Studies have shown that unemployment and choosing a career path is a major cause for young persons to undergo stress or anxiety. Early stages of one living on their own for the first time and learning to cope without parental help can also induce feelings of isolation and loneliness. As we spoke about in previous episodes of State of Mind, millennials are sometimes referred to as the boomerang generation or Peter Pan generation because of the members' perceived penchant for delaying some rites of passage into adulthood for longer periods than previous generations. These labels were also a reference to trend toward members living with their parents for longer periods than previous generations. This all begs the question, are we becoming a nation that is unable to cope? Back with us to help provide some insight on the topic are the following guests. Meghna Sarma is an incoming MBA student at the Leonard Stern School of Business at New York University. Pamela Kavalam is a Student Services Administrator at NYU's Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. And finally, Dr. Priscilla Rogers-Fahy is an Associate Director at the Counseling and Advisement Center at Borough of Manhattan Community College. Meghna, Pam, Dr. Rogers-Fahy, thank you for joining me. So I want to throw out the first question. I'm very excited about this because it is quite different in terms of who you ask what the answer to it. Is the quarter-life crisis a real thing? And Dr. Rogers-Fahy is our on-site specialist. Can you comment on that?
I think it is a real thing. I think that there's definitely, you hear a lot about a lot of students that are still living back at home. One, because they just can't afford to live, you know, on their own. Mm-hmm. So they're living with their parents, they're living with maybe grandma, grandpa, finding other siblings and things, just because it's really hard to make it, especially here in the city, being able to pay rent, food, mm-hmm. that type of stuff. Just basic, normal living daily skills, I think, that one needs, okay. Definitely.
Pam, your thoughts? Do you think it's a real thing?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was thinking about this a lot about my own life. Like, did I ever have a quarter-life crisis?
Could you be going through one right now?
I know, right? Yeah, maybe I am. I'm not sure. But yeah, so I graduated from college, and then I went straight into grad school. And then when I finished grad school, I spent 2 years living in Japan. I did the JET program. So
what does the JET stand for?
JET stands for the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. Okay. So it's basically sort of like the Peace Corps, except it's through the Japanese government. So they hire people from all around the world to teach English or to work for the government. Okay. So I worked at a high school for 2 years. But at the end of college, I knew I was going to grad school. At the end of grad school, I knew I was going on JET. And when I came back from JET, I wasn't working for about 4 months. And that was one of the scariest points of my life because I'd always known what I was going to do far in advance. And to just kind of think about the future and it be kind of this blank space was actually pretty scary. I mean, I called it fun employment at the time. And, you know, I got to read, I got to go to the library and just read a ton. I got to hang out with friends. I got to hang out in the city a lot. It really helped that JET does give you a little bit of money when you leave.
Oh, good.
So you can kind of have something to live off of. But it was kind of scary because I just had no idea what I wanted to do next. And you just spend all this time thinking about it and just not really having an answer and just realizing that there isn't one answer. You just have to figure it out.
Right.
And so I work with the JET Program Alumni Association right now, and we're trying to find our niche, like what do we do?
Right.
And like what do we do that other things in other people's lives, like the work doesn't do, or you know their church doesn't do, or something. Right. And we're trying to focus on professional development. So it's helping people who are maybe in their 20s or 30s, and they're looking for their next step, or they're thinking about what they're doing next, to kind of help them get that idea. So so we do a lot of professional development programming, and we're doing different things like that. So it's just like sort of, I feel like it's,
give some direction.
Give direction to people that are not 22, that
Sure.
are a little bit older than that. So.
And Meghna, we know that as an incoming MBA student, you've got your plan for the next 2 years, but is the quarter-life crisis a real thing to you?
I think I definitely went through my own version of a quarter-life crisis. I graduated during the financial crisis, and again, having no track, it's kind of difficult to navigate that time.
Sure.
But I would also say that it's not just a quarter-life crisis.
Sure.
It could be a crisis at any point whenever you're trying to change or figure out the next step that's not necessarily evident. I think a lot of times that maybe students have a plan when they're going to college, or as you said, going to grad school post-college, or they get their first job, but eventually you may leave that job and you have to figure out what the next step. Maybe your job is not giving you exactly what you need, maybe you need to go to school, and at each point that's probably feels a little bit like a crisis, because you don't really know what to do or how to get to that next goal. So I think crises come and go throughout life.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. So Pam, my question is to you, especially someone who works in student services. It is understood that college is meant to be a time, and academic environment more importantly, is meant to be a time to learn about oneself through trial and error and preparation for the real world. In the race to become a successful all-around student, is college no longer a place that one can fail and learn from those mistakes?
Wow. Okay, let's see. So it's interesting because I've only worked with graduate students,
Sure.
so I'll speak to that kind of experience. But yeah, I mean, I think for our students, we really encourage them to try to go out of their comfort zone. So when I talk to students about what they want to study, some students say, I'm undergrad, I did finance, I'm going to do finance. And I say, actually, it's probably better for you to do something that's not finance, because you already have that background. What do you not have that you can bring? And it's a lot about getting out of your comfort level. And also another thing that we tell students is that you can jump from internship to internship the 4 semesters that you're at Wagner. And that's the only time in your life where you can have a different job every 4 months and it looks like a good thing, not a bad thing. So it is a bit about finding yourself, and because grad school gives you that safe space. You're still doing something, but you can kind of by trial and error figure out what is actually right for you.
Sure. Dr. Rogers-Fahy at BMCC, do we promote an environment where students can fail and not worry about the severe repercussions that real life would provide?
Yeah, I think that it's safe to say that we do encourage people to sort of, again, you're trying these new things, maybe new opportunities. We want them to get engaged in student clubs and become mentors or mentees. And some students need more help than others. And if you get dismissed, we understand that you may be at a point in your life where something may have happened to you that semester, and we're okay with giving you another chance to come back to school and saying, that part can be forgiven and let's start over. I think that we now offer tons and tons of majors, and we see students all the time that sort of change. They thought they were coming in as a business major and decided this is not for me. The same can be true about nursing. It's a highly competitive program here at our school, and it becomes very stressful, and they said, you know what, this just isn't for me, let me try something else.
And Meghna, as an incoming student, but also someone who's been working for a while and has already multiple degrees, what are your thoughts now that you're going back to school? Is this a place where you're learning to maybe get out of your comfort zone, take some risks with potential mistakes, but then being able to bounce back from them? Or is it a very controlled environment you think you're going to?
So I kind of think about failure in a very different way.
Okay.
I don't really use the term anymore, because I think it's really about how you contextualize it. And I think a lot of times if we have one defined goal that we thought we wanted to accomplish, whether it go into nursing, get a law degree, and then if you don't achieve that or you veer off that path, we characterize that as, oh, I failed because I didn't accomplish that goal. But I think what I've learned is that just because you change what you want to do or your goal, it's not really a failure. It's just kind of a journey and an experience which you can bring to the next thing you decide you want to pursue. So that's kind of how I view everything in undergraduate, law school, and MBA. Just because maybe law school didn't pan out for me the way I wanted it to, I learned the skills in law school which are very applicable now, and I wouldn't have gotten to where I am right now if I didn't have law school, and wouldn't pursue an MBA because at this point, if I didn't get the opportunities I had after law school. So I just kind of look at it as all an experience and not really a mistake or failure kind of thing.
So pressing the point, because it would be not a show of state of mind if I didn't. In the same vein, though, going back to the academic environment, if the academic arena is somewhat, and this you can agree or disagree on, is Darwinian in its approach, that it creates a natural bell curve, which I think we can agree upon, aren't colleges doing just as much to create a culture of stress as students are constantly pushing themselves to be on the right-hand side of that curve? Dr. Rogers-Fahy?
I think that it creates stress, but at the same time it also teaches you skills and maybe give you tools in your tool belt to sort of, you know, what do you do in case you do get stressed? I mean, that's part of what my job is anyways, as a psychologist, and in the counseling center is, you know, yeah, life is stressful. Now let's try to figure out the ways that you can sort of decrease some of that stress or find triggers of that. We also do a lot, you know, in preparation for finals and just to help students along the way to know that there are services and there's a lot of help out there.
Okay. And Pam, at your place in student services, what are your thoughts on that proposal that we are creating an environment of stress for students?
Yeah, I mean, I think also dealing with stress is a really important part
of
learning. It's a life skill. Yeah, I mean, I've dealt with students that you tell them a piece of bad news and immediately they start getting really upset and angry or crying, and it's like part of being in grad school or part of being like growing up is learning resilience and just realizing that you can fail. Failing is not the worst, and it's not failing, it's what you do after you fail. Or if someone says no to you, you know, you can't just push back until they say yes. You have to think of alternatives, you know? So I think part of graduate school, college is about learning how to be resilient and take that outside of the classroom, take that to the life and your job, you know?
So now for Pam and Meghna, I would like to talk from the standpoint of your time as an undergraduate students to now, and Dr. Rogers-Fahy as someone who works at the BMCC. There is an expectation that the college experience will prepare students to be able to face life head-on, or so we think, and more importantly, help them figure out what they want to do for the rest of their life. Is this an unrealistic expectation, and more importantly, is it the responsibility of colleges to have to help students figure that out? Dr. Rogers-Fahy?
I think that college, especially at our school, does a really good job of laying the groundwork.
Start here, go anywhere.
Start here, go anywhere. Try out as many things as you possibly can. If you do make mistakes or, you know, like you're saying, failures, there's okay. You're going to pick yourself up, and there's people here that really support you. I think that you just want to try out as many new things as possible. You know, so I don't think that there's anything wrong with students trying new things. Coming back to school.
Did you, and Pam and Meghna, did you guys feel, and Pam, please start first, did you feel when you went to Rutgers that you knew what you wanted to do, and did you feel that you had to figure out in those 4 years, or is it something that you just felt, you know, you would take those 4 years to learn about yourself, and then the answers naturally come on their own?
Yeah, so when I think of college as more learning skills and not learning content, whereas grad school, I feel like it's more about learning content. And you know what I mean? So like when I think about my undergrad, I did women's leadership, and then, which was great. I mean, that was very specific to Rutgers. But then I also did the English major, and it was less about learning about literature and more about learning how to think critically and learning how to write and how to speak. So I think it's more about those kinds of skills. And then it's funny because I actually was telling you I wanted to be a lawyer. So I was really, my freshman year, I went to the pre-law advisor, I had a plan. And then my senior year, I just realized that all the internships that I did, all the classes I took, I did not want to be a lawyer. That is not what I wanted to do.
Fair enough.
So then I did informational interviews with the people who worked in student services or worked in study abroad and all the different deans at my school, and they just told me to go to grad school. And so I said, okay, fine. So, and it worked out, you know. So I kind of knew what I wanted that senior year, but I really don't think college should be about specifically figuring out what you want. I mean, you were a bio major, right? And then you ended up doing something completely different. Yeah, so I don't really think it should be about that.
And Meghna, your thoughts? I'm assuming you agree?
Yeah, I don't think college should be about figuring out what you need to do for the rest of your life. I don't think it's possible. But I do think that there is a level of stress that may hit you maybe your junior, senior year when you're kind of forced to figure out what you should be doing. Are you going to grad school? Are you getting a job? What do you want to do? And I think sometimes characterizing what I want to do next rather than this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life may be helpful in mitigating some of that stress, because I think I definitely felt it junior and senior year being like, oh my God, I'm graduating. What am I doing after I graduate?
Got it. So let's continue on the topic of loaded questions. Considering that change is the only constant in life, stress in itself is a very normal thing, which we all agree on. Is the ability to deal with stress something that can be learned? And if so, how can or what is the academic arena doing to help prepare students for the real world? Resident psychologist, Dr. Rogers-Fahy, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's trying to teach people that stress is real, and it is a normal part of life, and it is okay. I work in just like, a very specialized field where I can see where stress can lead to all sorts of things. And I'm just there to sort of help assess and pick up the pieces and that kind of stuff. But for most people, stress is just a normal part of your everyday life, and it's how you look at it, it's how you deal with it, it's how you do you find ways to exercise or talk to people, and what's your social support, and or is it something that's more serious? Is it something that you need medication for, and possibly a more intense type of treatment? So for me, there's a spectrum of what stress is for myself, because that's what I specialize in. So
absolutely. So let's take that thought of stress, maybe not from the medical standpoint, but from the academic standpoint, Pam. How do you, as someone who works in student services, address someone who's feeling tremendous stress, whether it be at the undergraduate or graduate level, and are there ways for them to take that and use it in a positive way?
Yeah, I think part of stress also is lack of preparation sometimes too. I mean, I think you prepare yourself, you're not going to be as stressed out in terms of academics, if you're like with a muscle thing, like where you can deal with the stress because you're using your instincts and you've practiced so much. It's not quite as tough. But also, we set up things like the Wellness Center. So when I have students that are extremely stressed out with anxiety issues, we have a counseling center that's terrific, and we also have a Wellness Center that does 24-hour a day, like a phone line that they can use. There's also a really great Office of Spirituality that does meditation and yoga classes a dozen times a week. So, and there's also this thing about mindfulness that's kind of taken over the university, and it's really about taking care of yourself mentally and just making sure that when you are in a stressful situation, you're thinking about the bigger picture. You're not just kind of focusing on the moment, thinking about what do I actually need to do next, and kind of just not losing your nerve in every situation, because that is causing undue stress on yourself if you're not able to control your emotions all the time. But
so Meghna, I want to take a specific example for you, because you graduated from law school, I think, right before the 2008 financial crisis. Is that correct?
The year of it.
The year of it. Oh, great, even better. How was that stressful period, and specifically in terms of the legal profession? How did that affect you? And we talked a little bit about you deciding to eventually go through this journey to go back to business school. But at the time, how did you deal with that as someone who is still relatively young and out of college? But more importantly, dealing with life on your own now as a single individual human being and an adult?
It was very difficult. It was a blow to my confidence, because I had always had the next step, and when I graduated I had a fellowship at Fordham, but I didn't know what was going to be post the fellowship. So that was a little unnerving. I was out on my own for the first time. The assumption is that you're supposed to have a job right after law school. That's why you went there. And that didn't all pan out. So it was just generally a very stressful time. But in that stressful time, I had to develop coping mechanisms, because I couldn't really do anything about the situation. The only thing I could control was myself. So I had to act, figure out, innovate, be creative. And that's kind of where I developed those skills that I'm using now, was because of that experience. So definitely stressful, but also very much a learning experience.
Sure. So I can actually speak from my own experiences of the 2008 financial crisis as someone who worked in Wall Street, working at a major investment bank. My team was actually one of the very first in Wall Street to be let go. December 18th, 2011. The reason that rings so well, it was 1 week before Christmas, and that will always resonate with one's person. But losing your job is one thing, but then I also lost my visa, because I was Canadian at the time, and so I was here on a work visa. But it gets better. I lost my visa, I lost my job. I also had a home, so I had a mortgage to pay. And that in itself now all of a sudden meant, where are you going to pay for your mortgage, and how are you going to keep that going? And then finally, I use the phrase going up the downstairs. We were just the beginning of the many mass layoffs that were coming on board, and trying to find a job in that market was almost virtually impossible. Now, with that said, one of the good things that did come out of that was our investment bank actually allowed us to go to an outplacement firm. I like to term it Wall Street rehab. Basically, anyone who was at our firm had a chance to go to a place that had a computer, a desk, you know, just an environment that was a little bit more conducive to what we did for 12 hours a day at the very least, and keep ourselves somewhat intact mentally. Because it was so easy to wake up in the morning and go, why bother? I'm going to go back to bed. But to keep that structure. And I think what I learned from all of this was you have to keep moving forward. This is not what defines you. Right. This is just a step in the road, and this is an experience. And you know, you use the term fun unemployment. I wouldn't go that far to say my experience was fun unemployment, but I did end up on my feet, and I'm very grateful that things worked out the way they did, because for many people it didn't, and they left the industry entirely. But I would actually attribute a lot of those coping mechanisms to deal with stress. Funny enough, back to college and grad school, when they threw so much at you, when you had more things than you could possibly imagine, and getting a perfect GPA was not necessarily the goal. The goal was to get a very good GPA, but a job, a social life, and some semblance of a mental health. And I think that's what we're all kind of saying here at the same time. So it's interesting how that's affected most of us. But on the point of the 2008 financial crisis, Pam, to the extent that you can speak to Wagner, how did they respond to that from an academic standpoint for students who were maybe thinking about coming back, and for students that were just graduating at the time?
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually wasn't at Wagner in 2008. I was safely in Japan, away from the, and actually the yen was going. Yeah, I was like, I think the yen was more. I forget. I can't remember now. Sure. But yeah, I think that the focus was because we were getting more applicants. Sure. Really strengthening our career services and just being like, that is the reason you should come to Wagner, is because we're going to help you get a job when you finish this degree. So it's going to be really useful for you. Sure. So I think it was more positioning ourselves to make sure that we got that message across, and that people knew that this was a space that they could come to. I mean, it is hard because we like law schools, maybe they do placements. We don't do placements, but we really give students resources. Like, they can reach out to alumni. We have a really strong alumni network, and they can reach out to 3 alumni at a time through like our online system. We have really great career services counselors who reach out to hundreds of companies to come and speak at our office and do career chats. The alumni are really good about bringing other current students in for internships, and so it's really about make sure that they're leveraging their network, and that's how they're going to ensure that they're in a good place when they graduate.
Okay. And Dr. Rogers-Fahy, how did the BMCC respond to the 2008 financial crisis?
Yeah, I wasn't here either, but I think that I'm starting to see within the last 2 years sort of the answers to some of what was going on is that people are finding it very difficult with college education already, with a 4-year degree, to get a job. So we're coming back for another 2 years in a different specialization, because our school does focus on promoting that you will find a job or some sort of placement out of leaving here once you graduate, or maybe then transferring to one of our 4-year universities. So you saw people that had already had like maybe a 4-year degree in history saying, I can't find a job teaching, let me do respiratory therapy, or let me do nursing, or let me go into something that's just a different specialty, because they needed to support their family.
Now, my last question to you, Dr. Rogers-Fahy, is we heard from Pam, we heard from Meghna, and I somewhat implied it. Have you ever gone through a quarter-life crisis?
Yeah, I think that we all did at some point. I, very much like you, I was just, I went straight through undergrad, grad school, was one of the youngest in my classes and at my school. And I think I saw the pluses and the minuses of being able to do that. And then once I graduated from there, I think my answer to my quarter-life crisis was to move across the country. Okay. So at 26
because the Northeast is so much better than California.
Well, that was the thing. So everybody from California was like, why would you leave? Right. And everyone from New York was like, why would you leave California? But I was like, why not? So I ended up getting a postdoc here is what made me move to New York City at SUNY Purchase, and came here knowing I had no friends, no family, nothing. Sort of like starting fresh. Right. And I think that I wanted to prove to myself, because everything had sort of been planned out for me, getting the right grades, getting into the right school, doing all the right internships, and then finally saying like, well, what do you do now? Right. And it was like, well, you start all over again, right? And you have the skills, and I think I wanted to prove that to myself, that if I wanted to be a psychologist and to work with all types of people, I wanted to just to sort of immerse myself into everything that I possibly could, and prove to myself, right, if you can make it in here, you can make it anywhere. Right.
That's a fair point.
And then I've never moved back to California. I'm still here. So I think I found my niche, and I found where I wanted to be.
Right. So on that point, this question is to everyone, but I'll start with you, Dr. Rogers-Fahy. If you could speak to a millennial now, or a future millennial even, what advice would you give to them, pending they actually heard you and listened and took advantage of it, to help them navigate through the game of life? Not necessarily academia, but the game of life.
I think that first and foremost, I would say take care of yourself. Really follow your gut. And that's a lot what I tell students, is that a lot of times things are happening around you and you really know what the answer is, except that there's a lot of people around you that are telling you what you think you should hear or the things that you should do. Really follow your gut, your heart, what it is that you love to do, and network. Mm-hmm. Network is one of the most, I think, one of the things that's really not talked about. You're not taught how to meet new people, meet mentors, keep in touch with your professors, keep in touch with all the people that really have inspired you, because later in life, those are who you go back to for future advice.
Right. Meghna, yourself?
I think my advice would be, you only know what you know. And what I mean by that is, you can look back 5 years from now and say, oh, I wish I had done that, or it didn't go as I planned, and just don't regret it. Just keep moving forward, and everything will work out. You will find a way out of whatever problem you're dealing with, whatever unhappiness you may deal with. You'll find some way, some path, the advice, the skills, the mentorship, anything that you need, as long as you're, open to to finding it.
Right.
And also, I would echo networking. That's one thing that...
Something you'll be doing a lot of in the next 2 years.
And that I wish I had known and learned as a skill back in undergraduate, because I think it's actually a very, very valuable skill.
Excellent. And Pam, yourself?
I would say to not undervalue your skills and your self-worth. I just feel like I know a lot of people that really worry what other people are thinking, or thinking that they don't have much to offer, especially in terms of networking, just like feeling like they don't have something to offer, and just realizing that you do have value. You do have to realize what that is and be able to communicate that to others, but just not to worry. So I just feel like people are always worried about how they come off, or if they say the wrong thing.
That's from the Northeast.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
California seems a lot more chill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's also about being a little bit more chill too, but yeah, just being a little bit more confident.
So in the same vein, to help us wrap up the show, maybe you could take a couple minutes, Pam, talking about the work that you do at the Wagner School of Public Service, specifically in the area of student services. Can you just elaborate on that and help us understand?
Sure. So in terms of the school, I'm the academic advisor for all the students who are in the Masters of Public Administration program. So we also have urban planning, health. I specifically work with policy, finance, and management students. So I kind of help them from the orientation all the way to graduation, making sure that the classes are complementing what they want in their career and what they want out of the future. So it's pretty much, and answering the questions of about 1,000 students every day. Wow. Yeah, so it's a great place.
In that case, I only had a couple for you today.
Yeah, sorry, I know, exactly, right? Yeah, no, I'm used to this.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Meghna, Pam, Dr. Rogers-Fahy, thank you so much for the time. I think this is a topic that we could go on for another couple hours, but definitely nice to get some insights from all of you, so thank you.
Thank you.
On that note, that'll wrap up our show for today. If you like what you saw in today's episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any questions or comments for myself, please reach out via email or Twitter. And if you'd like to keep up with the ongoings of State of Mind, check us out on our website at www.bmcc.cuny.edu/stateofmind. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. And remember, every life is a book. Make yours a bestseller. Have a good night.